Hey everybody, welcome to the Travel Tech Podcast. Now, every time you go to take a flight, pull out your phone at that gate. You look at the QR code ready to scan. Now, that moment exists because of the work of my guest today. Eric Leopold spent 15 years at IATA, the body that quietly holds global aviation together. And in that time, he helped replace, some of you may remember, a magnetic stripe was embedded in every boarding pass, paper boarding pass. That's now replaced with a barcode system used by hundreds of airlines and thousands of airports worldwide. Actually saved $1.5 billion across the industry. And that was just his warm-up act. In this conversation, we go from the boarding gate all the way through to the question of whether AI agents will one day shop, book, and manage your entire trip on your behalf, and why trust, data standards, and identity might be the things that determine whether this future actually comes about. Eric is now founder of 3Dot, a premium consultancy to the travel industry. He's a board member and an advisor to other businesses, and he's one of those rare people who has actually shaped the plumbing of the industry that some of us may not even notice as we're traveling from A to B. Now, I'm Alex Brooker. This is Travel Tech Podcast, brought to you by Airside Labs as airsidelabs.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. So, hi, Eric. Welcome to the Travel Tech Podcast. Good to see you.
Hey, Alex. Thank you.
It's great to have you join us. I'm looking forward to really getting into the detail. I think to start, I wanted to play a little game.
Oh.
I apologize for the surprise, but you have to guess the year.
Now, I like surprises. Let's see.
In this year, YouTube was launched. In this year, The Office US version had its TV debut, and on the Nintendo DS, the game Nintendogs was released. Does that help at all? Could you care to guess the
year? I mean, okay. I know it's between the 20th century and the 21st century. Yeah. Do you have any other? Otherwise, I'll use ChatGPT if you.
Well, I just wanted to perhaps start off because it was actually 2005, so over 21 years ago. And the reason I wanted to start with that year was to perhaps take a trip down memory lane. And I was wondering if we could start by talking about your time with IATA and some of the projects there, because I think anyone who's taken a flight will have benefited from some of the work that you've done. So I was wondering if we could start the story there and maybe start talking about the common boarding pass.
Yeah, happy to do that. It's funny because I remember 2005 because that's when I joined IATA, but for some reason, YouTube, etc., felt much older than that, and I didn't realize it happened at the same time. Well, I was doing those, two-dimensional barcodes, so that existed already. But then I met with the people at IATA at the time. They had this idea already because airlines had their own barcodes already. So it was there. And it's just, so I was doing this startup, but then they said, do you want an impact? And it's true that when you have a startup, whatever you do, it may be limited, but then I said, if this works, so it was kind of a startup as well, because you never know when you create a standard if it's going to catch on or not. But I say, if it works, everybody who's flying is going to have your 2D barcode that you need to design for boarding pass. So I said, that's worth trying. So that was it. And the design process, I don't know if you want to go into that, but the design process was quite exciting because someone used the quotes like failure is not an option, that type of things, because they say once you design the standards, manufacturers, airlines, airports, everybody is going to implement. If it's too slow or if it is not, is wrong, etc., everybody's going to suffer at every flight and boarding. So failure is not an option.
No pressure.
I knew we were not launching a rocket to the moon, but still it felt like that, mission critical type project, and also something that it takes time before you see the results. So you're in a room with lots of people designing it, and it's only 5 years later, to 2005 to 2010. It's only 2010 that you have those 5 billion, codes for every flight and every boarding pass. So in the meantime, you have time for people to say it won't work, or it will be too slow, or it will be blah blah blah, etc. So that was quite fascinating experience.
And so, would you say that the technology was more of a challenge, or was the politics and, from your experience working with global standards, is the politics more of a challenge?
Exactly. The people think it's a technology because it's technology is the enabler of the change. And in that case, the technology change was obvious. It was magnetic stripe that was decades old. And the new one was, imaging, sensors, cameras that could read codes. So it was 100 times. It was not even 10x. It was 100 times cheaper. Yeah. One device, MagStripe device, was a few $1,000s, and a little camera to read the barcode was a few dollars, or $50. So it was like 100 times cheaper to do it like that. So it was a no-brainer in terms of technology and cost reduction. It was saving $1.5 billion a year to airlines and airports to change technology.
Wow.
So it was no-brainer. So then you say, so technology is the enabler, but then the resistance to change, that's the long list. And resistance to change, commercial models, politics, you name it, regulations. Because IATA was like, regulating in a sense, but every market, every jurisdiction had their own local regulation, which involve aviation security, which involves civil aviation in general. So that's that was my first discovery of how all that works together. And still, people today, or most people I meet, don't realize that, right? Because they say, and we'll talk about some other standards later, API, and they say, I don't understand. You create an API standard like NDC. I don't understand why a year or two later it's not 100% implemented worldwide. So I said, okay, do you have time for a coffee?
So, how does the relationship work when there is a new standard or a project like that from IATA?
Yeah.
Would you mind just from the beginning taking us through how does that process work in terms of working with the airlines, getting something out there?
Exactly. Usually it's an airline association, so it's airlines decide, right? And airlines are free to join or not an association. Sorry. So the airlines who join the association, then they are in control and they decide what happens. And usually you need more than one airline. You need at least two. Usually it's a handful of airlines who have the same need, common need, right? In that case, a few have different barcode and they say, hey, we should all have the same, or they say we all have the same common use kiosk. It's not common use, we have the same airline kiosk at the check-in, but would be good to have multiple airlines on the same kiosk, or et cetera, et cetera. Or the bag tags make sense if we exchange bags to have the same bag tags, et cetera, et cetera. So you need a handful, at least, of airlines come together, go to IATA. If there's a group established already, they can discuss that as a group. If there's no group, like for the NDC, the distribution, there was no distribution group, right? So we create a group, we invite all the airlines who want to discuss, and that brainstorming can take place on, what's common together, how we do things. It has to be a topic that, every standard that comes from IATA is scrutinized by competition authorities, right? So it should not create any, competitive tension out there, all right? So it has to be for the good of travelers, basically, right? If otherwise you cannot agree on things between competitors if you cannot demonstrate to regulators that it's going to eventually benefit travelers. So we do that work in the background. That's it, and then all that design part ends with a proposal. So it's a Word document where you describe everything. This is how it's going to work. If it's technology behind it, like this barcode, you need to check that you can read. So there's the whole technical due diligence, if you want, where you invite all manufacturers, etc., and you display, like in that case, you display the barcode on the screen of the phone, and you bring the ones who's got the scanners, and you check response time, and you measure in milliseconds what was the response time, etc. So you do all that. Make sure it's ready. And once all that is done and you've convinced a critical mass of airlines, then you notify all the other airlines that are member of the association. And you say, at the next conference, we are going to vote. And if you've got unanimous approval, 100%, it becomes it's called the resolution. If it's majority, it's recommended practice. It's like a best practice if you want. All right, but not all airlines agreed. Right, so you've got different levels of adoption, but all that is called standards. It's a best way of doing things, and that's it. And then you publish it in the books. So that's minimum, is to say, if you're an airline and you need to do something, either you say, hey, I'm smarter than the average, I'm going to reinvent, I want a smarter barcode, or you say, I'm going to default to what every airline, every airport in the world is doing, because I'm not sure I want to spend time having a smarter barcode that will make a difference in my business. Quite the opposite. If I use the same as everybody, it's going to work everywhere. So that's it. But then when there's a new standard, there's the program part. So in some cases, you put adoption targets. So it's not only I want it in the books, I want to make sure everybody has it within 5 years or 3 years or whatever. And that's the implementation. So we had a part that is putting the standard in the book and a part which is implementing it 100% worldwide. So like electronic ticket, it was like 100% mandate, boarding passes, 100%, etc. And some others, we just put them in the books.
I see. So just going back to the magnetic strip before with the boarding pass in that way, was it just the problem with that technology? Was it just the cost? Because you could use a barcode and it's 10 times cheaper. Was that the only issue, or were there other problems with that old standard?
Well, each time we approach that, you have to recognize that the previous one was already a major progress compared to what was before. So the magnetic stripe, the standard was called ATB2, so Automated Ticket Boarding Pass number version 2, which was already the automation that went from handwritten tickets to automated paper tickets, meaning it was machine printed and machine readable. And if you have a ticket and a boarding pass, so ATB, it means that you issue a ticket and your ticket becomes a boarding pass, so you can automatically control at the gate who's boarding. As opposed to before, it was a visual check by the staff at the gate where you can have errors. And finally, it's automated because you can tear off the stub, the part at the end, and you collect that, which is for accounting purposes. So you can say, this passenger boarded the flight. So you collect all the stubs there, put them in a bag, send them, and you say, yes, I carried this passenger. Especially when you, as an airline, you carry a passenger, but you didn't sell the ticket because it's somebody else sold the ticket. So American Airlines sold the ticket and British Airways carried the passenger. So British Airways would use that coupon and through the interline settlement, claim that to American Airlines, say, yep, I carried the passenger, you owe me, for that segment. So the whole settlement part of flying was done through that automation. So the ATB was already like major improvement automation in the 80s, 90s with a cost, but a cost at the time, it was already an automation. So it was a simplification of what was before, which was handwritten. And then in the early 2000s, it was say, okay, but the paper ticket becomes an electronic ticket. So you don't need at all the ticket part. So electronic ticket done. But say, but we still have to keep that paper ticket for the boarding pass. And I say, no, you put a barcode and you remove 100% or 100 times cheaper to do it.
Mm.
So that's what is something at the time, say in the 80s, 90s, was like fantastic automation. 20 years later, you find another solution that is 100 times cheaper and faster. Electronic ticket and barcode boarding pass.
Mm.
And all that, I like that you start with history, because what seems like the best thing today, in 10 years, 20 years, will look like very legacy and, becomes obsolete. It's amazing at the speed at which it's changing.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I was sort of leading up to asking you, when you were in those meeting rooms talking about tickets and barcodes, did it ever cross your mind that people would have mobile phones with the touch screen? Because the iPhone hadn't been released until 2007. So having a screenshot of a barcode that was then good enough to be scanned, which is kind of very common now.
So I was lucky, I would say, right? Because all the trials were done on remember the Nokia phones and stuff like that, with we were counting the number of pixels on the screen to make sure that the number of pixels on our barcode is not too many pixels we can fit. Right?
Oh, that's cool. I like
and
that.
The other thing is we were using, I don't know if it still exists, but we all know SMS, but there was an MMS, which was like image message, MMS, which was a way to send pixels to the screen as opposed to just sending text message. And we were using and playing around with that to say, it's going to be a challenge. But the bet, I didn't have any insights. I don't have personal phone with Steve Jobs to say, hey, the iPhone is coming. But it was a bet to say, look, those phones are going, we could see like next 3 years, we could say, look, if the phones improve, the challenge we have today, in 3 years, that challenge will be gone because screens will be better. What I didn't know was the iPhone and the apps in the phone and the Apple Wallet and the wallet that would make it easier to download. That we didn't know, or the best it was like wishful thinking. So we were lucky with that, that it clearly accelerated. So initial business case was to print at home. So we had the test on the printers and the resolutions of printers, etc. Or it was to send via MMS to the screen of the phone, and the screen would be better. And we need to find ways to send by MMS. And then when the iPhone came, then you say it's a walk in the park. And then mobile boarding pass became, it's the mobile check-in. And the check-in is in the phone, and the boarding pass is displayed at the end. So that really accelerated everything.
No, that's amazing.
Thanks. Yeah.
And how you mentioned NDC a little bit earlier on. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind explaining what NDC is, and perhaps we could start to talk about APIs and everything before we get to the sort of current technology and AI and all those things.
Yeah, so we'll get to the AI part. And there's different ways to tell that story. So one way, if we just take the technology angle, right? And my background before joining IATA was building website, marketplace, all that type of things.
Okay.
And I joined IATA on the airport customer experience, etc. So that was boarding pass. And a few years later, I start learning about distribution systems. So that's another part of the airline and the commercial side, making offers to travelers and helping them buy tickets. And then they start explaining to me how it works. And then I learned about this, which is at the same time some fantastic achievements of the past, where airlines created distribution systems in the 70s, 80s, where every travel agent in the world could connect to like centralized reservation systems. They could connect to all the inventory, all the fares, etc. of all the airlines in real time. At the time, there was no e-commerce, no internet, no nothing. So it was all private networks, private protocols, all of that. It was like an internet before the internet. Internet and the web were like, 93, 95. Before that, tens of thousands of travel agents connected real time to all the inventory and all the fares. I say, wow, that was amazing. Fast forward 15 years later, the internet is there. APIs, etc. So at the same time, I was looking at how it was built. And I say that was fantastic, and I didn't know it existed. At the same time, I say, well, I'm not saying it's irrelevant, but there's room for modernization, if you want, using public network. Because the beauty of public network, connect any server to any server, right? And through open protocols, etc. So I say, IATA is in the business of open protocols, open standards, etc. Using an open network. Let's do it. Create standard APIs. So that was where I was coming from. But as I said before, IATA management doesn't decide those things. Is airlines came again to IATA. Airlines had tested API distribution in different markets, and they all face the same challenge, which is to say, when I go with my API to those agents, they tell me I'm not going to do something just for you, whereas the rest of all the airlines, they're on the legacy systems. So unless you all airlines get organized and you come with one API, etc., I won't bother. Although I see that it's more modern, you can display more stuff, it's more interactive, all the benefits of open networks. But unless you do that, so that's why I come to IATA. I have some things in back of my mind from my background. They come with that. I say, surely I can, put it in together and design that, which in simple terms is a standard API, right? Nobody said it was the best API or the shorter payload or whatever. It was just said it's common to everybody.
Yeah.
And when I discussed that with others who did or tried to do that for airports and others, I say, where's your common API for airports where you could put, all the gate announcements, all the security wait times, all the parking space availability, etc. Where's your common API? There's none. I say, why did it work? It was too complicated. Okay, I know. But then it doesn't work, because today, if you ask me, where is this portal where I can see 1,000 airports worldwide with all parking spaces, all everything, all the information you can find in an airport. I want to see all of that in one display in my phone. It doesn't exist. All right?
Yeah.
Why? Because if nobody is normalizing all of that, it's very difficult to aggregate and display in an easy way to consume.
So we have we have so at the moment, even today, we have multiple parallel systems running. So when one of our viewers or listeners goes to book a flight and they go direct to the airline website, as opposed to going to a online travel agent, there are different systems that they're interacting with. So booking direct with the airline via the website is actually pretty new, I guess. It's only been a few years since you could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Or how long has that been possible?
No, so yeah, the web started very basic static content, then was more dynamic, and then e-commerce started, so end of the 90s. And airlines were very early adopters. And at the same time, travel agencies were created, online travel agencies. And as in many type of digital evolution or technology evolution, it's not the more traditional travel agents that created, the first online travel agent, right? So Expedia came from Microsoft, etc. So it was like innovators, digital companies, pure players who created those online travel agents. And at the time, so I was not in IATA, but I was interested in that because travel was one segment I was looking at. It was interesting to see those new players there, but also to hear from airlines to say, "Oh, we are going to get 100% of the traffic coming to the airline website," like disintermediation, right? And that's interesting concept because each time there's new technology, you say, "Oh, it's going to disintermediate."
Yeah.
And usually when you say that, it's because you're not, thinking through why the intermediaries are there. And in that case, if you're a consumer and you want to compare flights, right? Either you have a browser with 10 tabs with one airline in each, plus a few tabs for the hotels, plus all that. Or you say, hey, good idea. I'm going to call that online travel agent that is going to display all of that for you, compare it, etc. Say, oh, I see the value of having an intermediary that is adding value to me, right? So that type of things, and we'll have the same discussion when we go to AI. You say, AI is going to disintermediate. No. AI is going to create a new layer of intermediation, etc., etc. We had those conversations before. And I'm not saying it's going to be the same outcome, because it's when you have the same cause, you have the same, consequence. But in this case, internet is communication protocol. AI is not communication protocol. Is different. It's more like computing and algorithm. So it's different causes. So it would be interesting to see consequences of AI on that business and to see what intermediaries become redundant, are not necessary, which are the ones that become necessary. So all that discussion, I think, is fascinating. But again, you're right. Let's start with talking a bit the past and what happened and what takes time and all that.
Yeah, well, maybe we can pull on that thread a little bit more and just start to touch on AI, because those intermediaries or middlemen, they are gathering information from multiple sources. They are normalizing and then presenting a clean product choice. So you walk in or you go to the website, or you go into a travel agent, you have package holidays, with everything bundled together. So it's an interesting role that they are playing, and it obviously has some value. So coming up to today, will AI do a lot of that fetching and aggregating and normalizing of data, or something else?
So there's multiple things in your question, right?
Yeah.
Maybe one topic we've not discussed of the history in IATA, etc., which is not the most popular one, and I believe is going to be fundamental for this AI change, is about data in general. All right.
Okay.
So, and what I realized with AI and AI projects is, if you want to do AI, and then you say, okay, show me your data. I say, we don't have data. I said, we're not going to do much AI. Right? So, and we were a bit at that stage also 15 years ago with this NDC. At the same time, there was another project that came up. It was two airlines having a joint venture, and they needed to work together. And they had two different systems and system providers. And they realized that they could not work together. They could not deeply integrate. Why?
Okay.
Because they had different data models.
Okay.
So the data model of one airline and one system provider and the competitor, if you want, were so different. The way the data is organized, etc., internally, so different that it could not work. The only thing that could work is what was standardized at IATA level, but
Okay.
all the rest would not work together. And that we said, okay, that's a challenge. Not that we wanted to change all of that, but we said we need to be describe much more data elements and relationship, so that airlines who want to have joint venture, etc., need to exchange data, even outside of some IATA standards, need to work together on that. And that became the aviation industry data model, right? And that was another 5-year project. So 75 working groups, from DCS to baggage to you name it, everything across schedules, all of that. Every working group had one more task to say, you are going to contribute to the aviation industry data model. You're going to define all the terms, etc., all the data, everything, data elements, and you are going to agree between you to define it. And once you've done that, you're all going to use the same super repository there.
Okay.
And it has to all work together. That what in this group you call it like that, what you call a flight here and what you call a flight there, and a leg and a segment and all of that, it's all consistent across all the departments, across all the working groups. So that's a 5-year exercise. It's done. There was no mandate that you're not going to ask everybody in the world to redesign all their software. But now, in case you have two airlines willing to work together, and you say, we use your data model or mine, I say, now there's one by default, so we can all default to one. Fast forward to AI now. If you want to build an AI layer on top of anything, but you say, I need to normalize all the data, what's your reference? What do you pick?
Yeah, where do you start? It has to be the...
It starts because you realize, I receive, and a simple example is maybe not so relevant for right now, but simple example I have, if you take airline and airport data and you start counting passengers, right? If you ask IATA will count 5 billion passengers a year. If you ask ACI, which is the Airport Association, they count 10 billion.
Okay.
So if you ask GPT, it say, it's a rounding error. I say, no, it's double count. ACI, airports are double counting. Why? Because for one flight, A to B, airlines, they count one passenger because a passenger on a flight goes from A to B.
Yeah.
But an airport A counts one passenger departure. Airport B counts one passenger arrival. All right. So airports count two passengers for one flight. So it's correct. It's logic that airports are counting twice the number of passengers than airlines. But try to explain that to ChatGPT. I ask ChatGPT, I say, why there's this? I say, it's a rounding error, or is this? The LLMs don't know why The numbers don't add up. And the best, I had also that, you say, oh, actually the number of passengers is 7.5 billion. I say, where is that coming from? I say, oh, I triangulated. I had one source, IATA, say 5 billion. I had another source, ACI, is 10 billion. So I thought it should be around 7.5 billion. I say, no, wrong guess.
Okay. No.
Wrong guess. It's because one is not counting the same thing. So back to AI, LLMs, and we can talk about, how we train LLMs and etc. The way they are trained is to give the most likely answer. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So likely, when there are two numbers that don't match, what's most likely is there's a rounding error, right?
Find an average,
or if they don't match, okay, there was a scope issue, etc. I take the average. But it's not likely response to understand that what is the logic between an airline and an airport counting, etc. No,
yeah.
I took that example to say, if you want to do AI, you need to have data, but you need to understand the meaning of each data that you are manipulating. So that's, I see as the biggest challenge to achieve anything in AI.
I love that example because what about transfer passengers? What if you have a layover? So numbers are even, it's so fundamentally different because the counting is different from each perspective. And so you cannot just take the text and the reports, bring them together and then try and average the totals. Yeah, it's a really good example.
Yeah, but there's a great tool for that. So we built like knowledge graphs. So it shows all the entities and all the edges and how everything connects, and you can follow that to understand the meaning and the relation between all the words you use. LLMs are not designed based on knowledge graph, right? So you can enhance the LLMs if you want, enhance the retrieval of information by using those graphs. If you want to make this Gen AI useful for the business, right? I mean, LLMs are very useful for the business for many things, right? As I summarize my conversation, if I don't mind how they use 3 dots, there's 10 ways LLMs I can write 3 dots, so that's funny. So if you don't mind what they write and how they write and why they forgot to mention and if they mix stuff up, etc., if that doesn't matter, they do great stuff. But for other things, which is that we are going to talk about, which is using AI for work. And by AI, I mean in this context, I mean the Gen AI part, the LLMs, etc. Using that for work, you expect more accuracy, more precision, more exhaustivity, more transparency, observability, etc. Many things you expect in the context of work that you don't have today. So I see that as a challenge on top of the first challenge I mentioned, which is having the right data. By right, I mean, consistent, normalized, standardized, connected, everything that you need to have.
So where do we even start in that case? Because I know that even with IATA models, some of the projects I've worked on was from the air navigation service provider side. And so they have the ATM information reference model and some crazily complicated XML schemas for exchanging data. So where do we start? Because it seems like on some of the OpenAI demos, it's very common to have an agent book a flight or look for a hotel. Travel seems like a really popular use case. So, Eric, where do we start with this?
Well, so I mean, we can start on the booking side. I think that's the obvious use case. If you say let's use AI assistants the ChatGPT and Claude of the world, let's use them to simplify the planning, shopping for travel. And why? Because there's a mix of complexity. People compare. It's a big spend. Usually, you're going to, if you look at how much money you spend during the year, there's not many things that are more expensive than a week or two holidays. So it's expensive. So it's money. So you want to compare, make sure that you take the best options, etc. So it's complex, it's expensive, and there's asymmetry of information if you want, because on one side you travel once a year, and on the other side you sell millions of tickets. So you say you don't know as much as the one you're buying from. So I see why it's a popular use case, and also when you want a trusted advisor, right? And that's maybe if I can say a word on that.
Yeah.
It's who do you trust? So if you're a traveler, do you trust your travel agent? If you're an airline, do you trust your travel agent? By that, I mean that the travel agent is in between and has two parties to serve, right? The travel agent is serving the traveler to say, I'm going to find the best flight, the best fare, etc. But on the other side, the airline is asking travel agent, sell as many as you can and sell the best price you can. Right?
Yeah, get the best price. Yeah.
So how do you please everybody? And I remember before all of that, I worked in media and advertising. And media and advertising, you had an advisor for the media buyer, so the advertiser, right, the brands. And they had a trusted media planner to tell them, this is where you need to advertise. And on the other side, you had the media seller that was a trusted advisor to the media to say, this is how you can sell your advertising space. That's it. So each advisor was trusted by the client and the supplier. But then I come to travel, and travel, they've merged both.
Both sides.
There's one advisor, the travel agent, he's advisor to both sides. And, it happens a little bit because when you go to booking.com or etc., and they show, the best offer on top. But then if you put your glasses on and you read the small print, it says, it may be not the one in your best interest, maybe the ones where we get the most kickback. They don't say it as clearly as that. But that's the type of headache you have. So you say, can the AI assistant become my personal trusted advisor for travel? All right. And why it could work? Because I pay $20 a month to Claude, to GPT, etc. I pay them for a service. The service I want from you is to find the best itinerary, the best flights, etc. And I don't want you to be polluted by your ranking by advertising. I say nicely polluted because I used to work in advertising. I understand, why it works like that. So that would be interesting because in that case, the travel assistant is now trusted by the traveler, which then doesn't rely on this intermediary, which is the travel agent of today. And the travel agent becomes the travel supplier's agent. Because originally, before there was a travel agent, it was an airline agent or it was a railway agent. They were an agent of the travel supplier, right? It was like a ticket office from British Airways, etc. And then that ticket of the airline became multi-airline and multi-mode of transport and became also hotels and say, oh, I can sell everything. So I'm like representative of all those travel suppliers. All right. So one thing that AI, I mean the Gen AI, LLMs, etc., one thing could change is instead of having one intermediary that those serve both sides and try to do best, would be that they become, again, advisors of their respective buyer and seller. And that, I think, would benefit potentially both, because I saw it in advertising. It was very healthy, to work like that, and very, because you have both sides. You have advisors to the media buyer, media seller. Those advisors, they are both experts, etc., and they work, I thought quite well together. So maybe that's a shift we can see in the market. I don't know if it happens, but that could be, talking about intermediaries, etc., and what changes, that could be a change.
So in that scenario, there is a need for a trusted agent or AI that the consumer will trust to act on their behalf. If like in ChatGPT now, I think this has not happened with Anthropic's Claude. I'm not sure about Le Chat in France as well, but in Le Chat, pardon. In ChatGPT, there have been rumors around selling advertising, things appearing. There was a deal announced around Shopify and Etsy. So if you start the conversation about a beautiful vase made by the hands of an artisanal craftsperson, then these things start to appear and you can click and make your purchase. But what I've just described is still bringing those two roles together, because in that scenario, ChatGPT has signed a deal. It's more like they're acting in the interests of trying to act in the interests of both parties. But I really like your idea of separating, because then you have an agent that you trust, and then they have to negotiate with perhaps many other agents acting on behalf of those suppliers and try and find you the best deal.
That's what I like to see. And again, I'm not against advertising. I work in advertising, and I'm sure there's a way to have advertising. And I remember when I started in advertising, so online advertising in 1997, there was no advertising on the web page, right? So you had to convince someone that there was an estate there and that you could convert it into revenue. And they look at you and say, the web is pure. It's coming from universities. It's coming from research, etc. We are not going to let business people pollute clean web pages with banners and advertising. So I heard that debate 30 years ago. It's going to be the same one, and we're not going to solve that in a system the same way we solved it, on the web. We need to find a way to bring advertising. I hope it's the opportunity to make it better than the way it is today, especially on OTAs, etc., where there's a bit of deception from the user, where the first link is paid by advertising and is not in your interest, and you need to be smart. Especially that, to me, that I was looking for a taxi, and the first link was like a fake taxi, and then they say, we cannot check every link. I say, well, but then I'm not using your website anymore if I have a risk to get fake stuff. So that, I think, I don't know how they're going to control that, but I'm sure that if I use ChatGPT and if I'm not asking anything, it says, hey, use this taxi, it's my friend, and then I use it and it's a fake taxi, I'm not going to use a GPT for a long time. All right. So I'm not saying it's going to happen. I say that's there's many challenges on the way to there. But I would say they are advertising, etc. I say is like, it's not a solved problem because it was solved on the web, and I think it can be solved on AI. This way of splitting the intermediaries, again, that's not solved for sure, but it happened also on other like advertising. It's the way it is. So this is the type of things are interesting. But then we can talk about what's not solved at all, and that is again more long term. But it's fascinating time to be in the business for sure.
It yeah, absolutely is. The trust issue is so interesting. We could talk a lot longer about how that, because trust is earned.
Yes,
it's not delegated or assigned. If you had an assistant, an agent that you genuinely or had delivered amazing deals for you as a consumer over and over again, that would inspire huge loyalty. It would be, you love that product. That would be incredible. And that trust could then be evaporated in an instant if suddenly there was prioritized deals popping up, a fake anything.
So now on that point, so imagine you build that trust between consumer and the AI assistant. And what I don't know is if you build trust with an artificial intelligence the same way you build trust with humans. That I don't know. All right. But let's assume for now it's similar. Like you say, you gain trust over experience, repeat, etc. Now, how AIs, so AI assistants, are going to build trust between each other? Where's the trust network? Where's the trust network? And where is the chain of trust? All right. And why I ask that? Why I ask that? Because remember when a few years ago we were all playing with blockchain, right? And
some of us still are, but yes.
Some of us still are, yes. My crypto bros are still working. Let me check my Bitcoin portfolio now. I'll check later. So, but the promise of blockchain was that chain of trust, in a sense, and it was appealing in some markets, in the airline settlement, etc. Not so much. Why? Because the association had already created that chain of trust. What we mean by that is that when you interline with another airline, you trust them on safety. Why? Because they all have the same safety audits. And that safety audit is higher than any safety audit in the world. So you create that safety trust through safety.
Yeah.
Settlement system. So settlement system that guarantees 100% that you get your money after carrying the passenger, etc. So there was already between all the parties of, it's 1,000 billion, it's $1 trillion industry. It's a $1 trillion industry that is already organized around trust that enable this interoperability between all the operators. So when blockchain comes, you say, we are going to disrupt it. I said, well, it's already well structured and organized. So, what you can win is not big. But if you go to another industry where there's no trust, there's no consistency in the experience, there's no safety standards, there's no settlement guarantees. You need to, chase your money if you want to get paid, etc. Then you can have blockchain for a few things like escrow, etc. Now back to AI right now, and I love the topic of trust. How are you going to build trust between the consumer and your AI agents? How AI agents are going to build trust between each other? And what are the elements you need to build that trust? One is identity.
Yep.
I need to know who you are. How do I know that I'm Alex, travel assistant? Very smart, very trusted by Alex. I say, oh, I'm going to book a flight for Alex on EasyJet. All right. Oh, I found an agent that says it represents EasyJet and can sell me a ticket on EasyJet.
Okay.
How do I know? How do I trust this agent?
I mean,
So in the IATA world, you've got travel agencies that have been accredited, right? So
it's
airlines have
established.
delegated the authority to audit every year, every travel agent, check the management, check the bank account, check everything, and then give a number and register it in the system and say, this is a trusted, so we can work with that one. In the internet world where there's no central authority like that, on the web, you go easyjet.com and you say, okay, looks like the real airline. Now, if it's in an exotic country that you don't know, and you search on a website you don't know, how do you know it's the real website of the real airlines? Or if it's a travel agent, how do you know it's legitimate? And how do you know the ticket you get? It's true for airline, it's true for concerts, etc. I want to go to a rugby game in an exotic country. I bought a ticket. How do I know they let me in the stadium? I have no idea. Right? So that's what I mean by trust. And trust, one element is identity. How you identify. Another part is how you get your money.
The enforcement of that contract.
Enforcement.
Yeah.
Where is the authority? How it's going to enforce? How it's going to work? How's the money is going to flow? And how you dispute? If you don't get the money, how do you manage disputes? All of that.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because each time I see a post on LinkedIn, they say, oh, I spent 2 hours last night and I vibe coded a travel agency and an airline system and a whole end-to-end thing. And I said, okay, in 2 hours, you don't even know what you're talking about. But that's, what I like about this industry is that it's so rich, so complex, so many things to consider. So, a lot of people. I'm 21 years in the industry. I'm still discovering, learning stuff. So it's never ending. So yes, it's going to be a challenge to build that end-to-end integrated shopping, planning, travel, shopping, booking, servicing, delivering, all of that. But once that's built, it's going to make a huge difference. You have your personal agent representing your own needs, knowing you, that is going to shop across a trusted network of agents representing all the parties. That is going to change. It will be amazing how it changes the experience. And it's not going to happen overnight.
No.
But it's time to build that. Question is, who's going to build it? That's the next question.
Is it going to be something? Is it a problem that one of the big tech providers can solve, or is it actually much, because of the complexity, because of the structure of the market, when it comes to confirming a booking and enforcing the terms of that ticket with a very small provider, a small airline in a faraway place, a hotel in a remote location, it's much richer in terms of a problem space than perhaps they realize.
I remember when what were you doing in 2010? When Google bought ITA, and everybody said, "Oh, Google becomes a travel agent," and etc. And I was coming from the advertising business, and I said, "Well, when you have so much traffic on your website and you can monetize eyeballs, you make 99% profit margin because having a website running up costs this, and the money you make from showing ads, so 99 profit. So why are you going to go in the business of being accountable for the transaction and doing all the servicing and collecting money. And I mean, it's a low margin business. So that was not a technology issue. Companies like Google, etc., they've got more smart people, more money, more, etc. Doesn't mean they're going to go into that business because it's a low margin business, complex business, right? So I think it's passionate people who go into that, business. But if you are the shoes of the Googles of the world, there's many other ways where you can run global operation, global business, highly profitable, highly scalable, all of that. And you see the challenges that they are facing with Gemini, with all of this. It's fantastic. And we keep talking about GPT and Claude, but the biggest one to me is going to be Gemini.
Okay. Why is that? It's interesting.
Yeah, because I think, let's talk about that, and feel free to jump in as well. Huh? But the Gemini, first, I think Google, since they acquired Google Flight, IATA, and they created Google Flight and all that, they've been on the forefront of, and there are others, the Skyscanner, the Kiwi, etc. But the technology that they put there for comparing flights and including the flight status, including everything, I think has been amazing. And I think when you go to the others, in GPT and Claude, etc., there will be a learning phase.
Okay.
To understand all the complexities of travel, like caching, like all of that. And I think one option for the GPT and Claude, etc., will be simply to point you to Expedia and Booking and others. And they say, it's not our job, go there. And I've seen LLMs being lazy for that, with saving tokens and stuff. Whereas Google, it's in-house. They've got their own Google Flights. They've got access real time to all that. So to me, that's the example where there's no intermediary layer, where they've got embedded into Gemini access to Google Flight. But if I say that, you tell me that, Eric, that's the opposite of what you said before, that you want to have your own trusted advisor, not being the meta search that is biased by advertisement. All right. So that's why I say this is fascinating development right now, and that's called that a strategic decision, because you need to pick a side. I think Google picks the side of we integrate everything and we are Gemini, and the experience would be fantastic. I use Gemini, I put all my preferences, everything, and Gemini access to everything, and I can decide. Of course, they are going to, via deep link, send me to the airline website or maybe to an OTA to convert. But the whole experience, planning, comparing, all of that, shopping, until I have the deep link for the fulfillment, that will be inside the AI assistant. Great experience, but without the trust that we mentioned before. Why do you say to pick that airline? Because they bet more money on the keyword.
Yeah.
That's the trust. Anyway.
That's where, maybe historically Google earned its trust because you could execute searches, and if a link was sponsored, you'd see promoted or advert, and there's a box around it, or it's highlighted, even if it's subtle. As users, we learn to look for that. Go, okay, those are sponsored. The in inverted commas natural responses would be underneath that. So any AI assistant, the labeling of things that are sponsored or paid for has to, the absolute minimum is highlighting of results. But because of the way LLMs work, there's a much more subtle influence that could come in where there's fine tuning or there's real time, very subtle, trying to bring you down a set of search combinations where you're planning your trip and you start off asking about beach holidays and end up booking a ski trip or something because you've been sent down a path towards some amazing deal.
It's back to the trust, and you're right. Google earned their trust because they managed to keep, or remove the bias from the search results, and they earned that trust through that, and they managed to keep that. And from my media days, you could tell the difference from the, high-end magazines where journalists are really independent, as opposed to some of the, free newspapers and stuff. And if you see an ad on the left page and you see an article saying how great that brand is on the right side, because it's a paid package, right? So I think Google managed to stay away from that editorial or advertorial bias. Some of the travel agents are not as good, right? Because they show you those hotels because they get more kickback. And, is it as clean as what you said? So that's the risk. And AI assistants will need to be careful how they navigate. And it will be a strategic decision. And to make those strategic decisions, you need to be mindful of that. And I trust many people are mindful of that. But you see some of the risks. It takes one decision, like are you going to accept the rule of the Department of Defense in the US or not? Takes one call and you lose the trust, right?
Yeah.
So, would be interesting to say. But that's one angle, because we discuss a lot the consumer side, and there's a lot to decide on the travel supplier side. How are you going to expose your content? Right? You've exposed your content. So originally it was your ticket office with paper manuals and stuff. Then you say, I'm going to put my brochure on my website. Then, I'm going to connect my website to my reservation system. Okay. Origin, destination, date, number of passengers, enter. Then you say, I'm going to do inspiration travel. Then I say, the mobile phones, I'm going to put the same thing there. But because I take my phone, I'm going to put all the other services, navigation, all that. AI is creating another channel. LLMs, etc. Another channel, but to do what? So travel suppliers, how are they going to engage in that new channel? So what you did in your travel office, and there are still shops. I see where I live. There's an Emirates ticket office, city ticket office. They show their business class seat. The way they show the business class seat, and you can sit
it's
on
there.
it.
It's physically there.
Physically there, the business class seats with the drinks, with the screens, everything. That's super cool.
That's cool.
Super cool. But I think you need just to go once there and you say, okay, I know why, I travel with Emirates.
Yeah.
So, and that you cannot just replicate that physical experience, because travel remains a physical experience. You cannot replicate that in the digital channels, right? So that's fine. So it complements. So the website, the mobile, etc., compared to the city ticket office, AI, new channel, what will be specific in that? And we know one thing specific is, how do I create that chain of trust with the shopping agents? That's one thing.
Yes.
What else?
There's so much. There's so much to that. I mean, there's a whole new, what used to be called SEO, search engine optimization, is now optimizing for the companies pulling data in for their next training run. If you have 1,000 blogs about every possible route that you're servicing and the wonderful things you can do, all enabled by ...
Yes.
And that it goes into the training data, then I would never say that's poisoning. It's much more optimizing or making your offer or your data available.
That's it.
And it goes in for training. And then before you know it, I know from my own website on Google Analytics, you start to see the referrals from ChatGPT and Perplexity coming through where people have clicked on a link and headed to your website.
Yeah. No, it's it takes 6 months, between the time you create your new content and they train the new LLMs and they cut the knowledge they use. So it's a new, and that's one of the things to do if you're a travel supplier and you want to exist in that new space of this LLM world.
Eric, thank you so much for this detailed discussion. It's so interesting talking to you about this, and you've been working in not just the data standards, but through your whole career, things that have touched anybody's life if they've taken a flight and traveled, and they will have seen the output from some of your work. So I think that's amazing and so interesting. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Alex, for the kind words. And I like the atmosphere. It felt like we were in the same room. I like your style, very intimate, makes very comfortable to join. So it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric.